You got to get bored, and that's how you invent things. You've got the history of the world right here in your pocket at any time.
Yeah.
You know, you can look up everything. I think this thing's going to ruin people, because without this, I used to have hours to fill with doing nothing but thinking. If this is in your hand all the time, you're never going to invent anything new.
Yeah.
You know, you never have time with your brain and yourself. I think solitude and cold makes inventions possible. You got to get bored. Hey Greg, what a surprise. Bill, how's it going today? Thanks. After you, man. Thank you. Do you like to use these? Oh yeah, with piano. Malfunctions don't need to happen. I figured out a long time ago, you know, why parachutes malfunction. But rounds were very hard, and the paracommander was very hard because it had all sorts of lines inside it, and all sorts of cuts. But when a round parachute opens, it goes from here, strung out, way out to here. The bottom of this parachute's got to travel 15 feet, you know? So lines get entangled in it. The canopy's never malfunction, the lines malfunction. Now when a ram air opens, it goes from here to these bunches, these little squares about that big, right? And that cannot possibly malfunction. It really can't. It's, you know, 18 of these little squares opening up. And so again, it's the lines. If you keep your lines even and tight as your canopy comes out of the bag, you're probably never going to malfunction. Huh? So that's what I've spent my life doing, is understanding the burble and making sure that the lines are even and tight when your canopy comes out of the bag.
Well, there you go.
You know, so we've designed that pretty much into our rigs.
The relative workshop, how it came about, you, your first employees, how they affected your life, I guess, really, the life in the industry.
Well, here, I was in Miami, and I'm teaching school. I'm a band director, and on Thursday nights I'm training first jumpers, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday I'm putting them out at Homestead Airport, right down there. Gary Dupuis had bought a DC-3. Every so often we'd drive up to 235 miles from Miami to DeLand. When I was in Miami, I ended up having 4 employees. Roger Ramjet was my first one, but he went away pretty quickly. So Mike Cirasoli and his girlfriend, Susie Luger. That was Silly, and Susie was Sloozy. And we had Mike Barber, who was Beanpole, or Beaner, because he was so skinny. And Mac, we called Smack because he kept having accidents falling off his bike. We used Smack to test every new system because if he could live through it, anyone could. He was so accident prone. So there were 5 of us, and we'd come up to the land and we'd jump Mr. Douglas. And we had done a small shop. It was a 2-car garage, and it was the back side of it, about that big. And one day I come home from school and the shop is empty, and there's a note saying, "We're tired of the drive. We moved to DeLand. We got a little shop up there. If you want to join us, join us." So the crew made me come to DeLand. Not that I minded it. So I went up there and we started doing it. And then I realized at the end of the summer, I'm making more money at this than I was teaching. So I made the hard decision and resigned as a teacher and stayed in DeLand. So it was Gary having the DC-3 up here that brought us up. It was a real culture around that DC-3. And it turned out to be nice because the DC-3 would bring in a lot of people, and I'd get a lot of ideas, and I could show my ideas to people and bounce them off people. And I get guys like Steve Snyder down here I could bounce things off of. What about this? No, I tried that, it didn't work, you know. So he and I were kind of rival inventors at the same time. We were both trying to work on a single point release. When it became obvious, when we got a piggyback and you didn't have a reserve to throw out and ram airs were spinning it like this, we needed a single point release. So he was trying, he patented one, and I finally, in my 5th or 6th attempt, came up with the 3-ring. But there were 3 or 4 releases before that. And I can't believe it's still around after 50 years.
And so that when you finally came up with a revision of the 3-ring that you felt comfortable with, are you the one that took it to altitude and tried it out? And
I remember getting the 3-ring together, the first one. It was a February night. Back then I was working all night and things. And so I got it together, and we had a suspended harness out back. And I remember it was February because it was cold in Florida. And I went out and I hung it up, and I hooked it up, just one of them. And I pulled it, and it worked. And I did it like 100 times. I remember freezing to death. And I'm saying, God damn, this thing works. And that next week, Snyder was in town. And we'd both been working on this project for a year or two. And I showed it to him, and he said, fuck it, Booth, this is it. You got it. Just like that. He knew the second he saw it. And because he was working on the same thing. Mm-hmm. And there it was. And it's still here.
So I know the Freebag was not one of UPT's inventions. And so when that Freebag came around, did you think this was a good idea? And what kind of challenges did it create for you to implement the Freebag?
Well, Paraflight and Steve Snyder, who, if people don't know Steve Snyder, he was the first guy to do relative work, did a baton pass, first one in the world with Charlie Hilliard back in the late 50s, early 60s. He gave us the Altimaster, the wrist-mounted altimeters we all use today. He gave us the first electronic automatic opener of the Sentinel. He marketed the first ram air parachute, the Paraplane. And he marketed the first ram air reserve and came up with the idea of the Freebag. And the idea here was they were still thinking about pilot chute hesitations and pilot chutes getting caught. If your pilot chute got caught somehow, he would deploy this 18-foot long, 6-meter long, wide piece of fabric that would have enough drag to actually pull the bag out of the container. And then when it got to the end of the lines, it wasn't connected. That's what the Freebag was for. If you're spinning, when you break away, you don't fall, you get thrown on your side. And if you have a static line, the relative wind is of course coming from under you, but it's also coming sideways. So if you have a static line, that pilot chute isn't going to go like this, it's going to go like that. It's going to deploy sideways to the relative wind. It always goes into the relative wind. So that you're going to have to be spun around. And when the reserve comes out of the bag in this case, all right, you have 2-foot different line lengths. What the Skyhawk does is put the reserve where the main just was, so all the lines are the same length. It's my old malfunction prevention. Keep the lines the same length at line stretch. So the Skyhawk does that. It puts the reserve where the main just was, not out to the side where the relative wind would have put it. And so that's the other big thing it does. Its side effect is it's faster, but that wasn't the whole idea. It was to be in line with the body and to be the same speed every time, 0.6 of a second, which gives you a separation velocity of 50 feet a second, which is ideal. I think we all know if your pilot chute is not pulling very hard and your bag lifts off slowly, as the lines unstow, the wind will blow the lines over the bag. You have a bag lock. If your pilot chute pulls too fast, it gives you a high snatch force at the other end. It gives you a disorganized opening. It has slider bounce, where the slider bounces off the canopy down a foot and then starts. You have a hard opening. So by controlling the speed at the canopy at line stretch is what the Skyhawk does. It's the same no matter what any malfunction you are. And that gives you the best chance of not having a reserve malfunction. Where the Skyhawk is faster is when you're going slow. And it's not necessarily the fast again, it's where it puts it. It's how it keeps the lines under good tension. So people just think the Skyhawk is only to be faster. No, that's the side effect.
But it's nice that even though you guys were competing against each other, you're also throwing ideas around and supporting each other.
The same with Strong and I.
Yeah.
We were competing in tandem, but at the same time, we got together. I guess this is a funny story. All right. The first tandem I've ever seen was done in 1910. 2 guys, a guy and a girl, under a balloon-held parachute on a trapeze. And they were taking 2 people tandem jumps, and they were demonstrating these things. And then there's been dozens of movies where the airplane's on fire, there's 2 people and there's 1 parachute. They jump out together. It's been around for a long time. Gary Dupuis, back in 1963, took his nephew and stuck the nephew in his security piggyback harness. Same chest straps, same leg straps. And the kid only weighed like 60 pounds, 50 pounds. Then in DeLand, we started with Kirk In 1974, Kirk Hanberry, he had multiple sclerosis and was in a wheelchair. He was always out at the drop zone. We said, let's give Kirk a skydive on his 11th birthday. So I took my Paraplane cloud rig, and Mike Barber, who worked for me, was dating Kirk's mother. And Kirk and Mike Barber only weighed 5 pounds more than me. So we made Kirk a little harness. It had 2 connections from Kirk right to here, and then Mike Barber jumped it. And we put Kirk in an 11-way on his 11th birthday. Bob Fabreau, that owned the airplane, also took his son Robbie and another tandem jump and on that same jump. And from then on, we took dozens of kids. But the limit was 220 pounds, no more, because the gear couldn't handle it. What we needed for tandem was the gear to get better. Get ram airs that were small enough to pack on the back of one person, but capable of carrying 2 with reasonable toggle pressures. A tandem rig, if we tried back then, would have weighed 100 pounds. But by 1983, that came together. And so Strong and I both took, admittedly, light girls, 100-pounders, that summer, and then got together and did the famous tandem 2x4, picture this around. And we knew we were falling fast. And in the first year of putting out tandem rigs before the Drogue was introduced, I think each of us probably blew up half our canopies. The joke back then was the purpose of a tandem main is to slow you down enough so the reserve doesn't blow up too.
Yeah.
So then Strong was working with the Forest Service, the smoke jumpers. Now the smoke jumpers had copied the old Russian static line system, which is not a direct bag. It pulls out a small drogue that's connected right here, and it trails behind them for a second and a half, and then automatic opener releases it. That holds the soldier stable. They've been doing it for 50 years. The smoke jumpers wanted the same system. So Strong was making the drogues for that system. So this is a Russian drogue design, was the first tandem drogue design for 50 years before. So Ted put it on his rig. And it slowed everybody down, but I looked at it and said, that's too complicated. Human factors here. Fine, tandem's gonna be a hop and pop thing. That's what I thought, because we were going too fast. I tried balloon suits, I tried everything. So the problem with the Drogue wasn't so much the Drogue, but we thought that the Drogue would be pulling as hard as the weight of the people. In other words, you got 400 pounds there, you got 400 pounds in that Drogue. And so we needed something like the 3-ring to release it. And so we put a 3-ring in there. Now a 3-ring's biggest fault is that you can put it together wrong. It doesn't matter much on solo jumping because you only use it, I'd say every 1,000 jumps or every 10,000 jumps. But in tandem, it's used every time. So you have 1,000 times more likely to have a missed rigged 3-ring in your system, right? Plus, when we put the 3-ring on, we had a container closing system, which was, 4 grommets and a pin, and the 3-ring, right? They weren't the same. So you could release the 3-ring and not have the container open, or the container can come open before the Drogue is released. So we had these out-of-sequence deployments. So in the first 10 years after Ted and I both put Drogues on, nearly 60%, 70% of tandem fatalities were related to the Drogue. I was right, it's far too dangerous. And that's where I decided to simplify it, and I came up with the Sigma. How I came up with the Sigma is interesting, and I'll show you the graph. I actually started graphing the force on a Drogue. And I found out that because the Drogue's in the burble, there's my burble again, it's inflating and collapsing roughly 30 times a second. That's that hum you feel. When the air hits you, you have a counter-rotating vortice on the right side, and then one on the left. 15 on the left, 15 at the right at 120 miles an hour. That gives a 30 cycle or 30 hertz hum. Whoa, in free fall. That's what you found. So the Drogue is alternatingly pulling high and pulling low. In 30 times a second, I have 15 times where the Drogue is hardly pulling anything. So when you pull the pin in the Sigma, you're pulling it at the bottom, not the top of the load curve. Okay, you can't feel it. It's actually vibrating and it's nothing there. So that enabled me to make the container closing pin the same way the Drogue is released. And since we've done that, Drogue-related tandem fatalities are just about at 0. All right, so the Sigma made tandem safe.
Ready, set, go!
Bill Booth is renowned for making skydiving safer, and he flies the same way.
Well, it's been a good chat.
Poolside chats. It's poolside chat. I mean, Roosevelt had his fireside chats.
Oh, there you go.
We got our poolside
We're in
chats.
Florida. We don't want to light fires right now.
Yeah, this is a little bit warmer than the last time we did this up in the mountains.
Yeah.